All right, everybody, we've got Amy Anderson here, the CEO of Wild Coffee Marketing, a Parallax customer, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But Amy, I just wanted to say thank you for jumping on this webinar, for joining from Florida. Really appreciate not just your partnership, but your teams as well. So we've worked closely with a number of your team members and a really, really great group. And I know, we don't even see the customer side. We see the operational and resourcing side. But why don't you just tell us a little bit about Wild Coffee, who you are? Give the attendees a little background for us, if you don't mind.
Sure, Grant. And thank you so much for having me today. I've been super excited about this conversation. We've had many not in this venue, so it's fun to do it sort of in a different environment. Um, I am the co-founder and CEO of Wild Coffee Marketing. We actually don't market coffee. It was a plant that was growing outside my window while I was writing a business plan in Miami, and it was growing up over the window, and I kept having to cut it back with a machete, and I looked up what it was, and it was called Wild Coffee. So I thought it was a perfect sort of name for a strategy-led group that
Mm.
serves as a growth partner to our clients. So I wouldn't sort of describe us as a typical agency in that I'm a brand side marketer of 30 plus years. And so really when I say strategy led, it is led by sort of CMO thinking and fractional CMO services backed by a fractional marketing team. So
Yeah.
although we have creative services and writing and creative side of our business, really we're strategists at heart and lead every engagement with that. So I have about, I think right now, 17 full-time employees, maybe 20, 21 altogether. We've been remote since I founded the company in 2017. So COVID was definitely a hold my beer moment. And we had been super accustomed to running remote teams at that point. And we specialize in growth-based businesses. So franchising is one of our major categories, multi-location businesses, and private equity-backed middle and lower market. So private equity firms acquire an asset and we help rebrand and grow that. So definitely honing in on businesses that require aggressive growth.
Yeah, and that's been really fun because I think even from a resourcing and the sort of project planning or task management that come with it, we got to collaborate a lot on how we support your team and give you more confidence around what things could look like. How do we sell more? Should we sell less? And it's been fun having those conversations with you. But as an agency owner, coming through 2025, and I talk to a lot of agencies, both that are Parallax customers and non-Parallax customers, but there was a ton of uncertainty during 2025. Can you relate to that? Or what helped you navigate? What did you not expect? Kind of how 2025 go for you?
2025 was a year of rigor, I think. I mean, that's
Mm.
the word that comes up the most in that when I talk to other agency owners too, there were some unexpected points of attrition,
Yeah.
delays, postponements, and scope demand. I think that we were being asked to do more and to be more nimble and flexible to drive results in a macroeconomic environment that had a lot of uncertainty. And if we were sort of more agency and straight campaign focused, it would be one thing. It would be media performance
Yeah.
and sort of return. But because we're strategy driven, it was so much about, our market is contracting. Where are we going to take the business? Where's our area of focus? What are additional platforms? Is our messaging right in this environment? So I think we were really asked to do more and then had some unexpected sort of turbulence in the market for sure.
And yet, coming out of 2025, I mean, the business operated well, right? There's certainly the ups and downs of it, but if you were to attribute maybe one to two things, like what helped you navigate that? Or how did you find, resilience in your team through that?
Yeah, operational clarity is really important. Where are your resources going at any given time? And when you have to pivot, you
Yeah.
have to be able to pivot the resources as well. So I think really understanding where I had capacity, what people were in what seats, were they in the right seats
Yeah.
in order to deliver? And I think that clarity from an operations standpoint is really important. You have to have processes tight. You have to have the right people in the seat. And really, as a CEO, my primary areas of focus are always culture
Yeah.
and people and the numbers. And I think capacity and utilization definitely comes up as a primary driver of those numbers for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember early on when you were actually implementing Parallax and not to showcase Parallax or anything, but it was a fun conversation because even like my mindset's changed so much over the years here. I started off in the project management side, went to operations COO, and I remember the kind of pivot point I had with the CEO I was working with at the time around like doesn't he just understand like if he could sell a different way, like it would just make my life so much easier. And now informed in those conversations, a lot more experience along the way. I think the questions as you as a CEO sitting in that seat, and I love that you've got those three kind of pillars, right? Culture, numbers, and driving the business, right? Like those, how are we how are we holding ourselves accountable to all three when sometimes they can rub each other the wrong way, right? Like they can cause a little friction. Like but I thought something that you said is like, okay, what is that capacity number? Can I sell more? Should I sell more? Like, and I think that thoughtfulness and then you seeing you engage your team with like real data to have those conversations, that gave me a lot of promise that, yeah, like, okay, Amy gets it. Like sales don't always go your way, right? Like you said, you might be asked to deliver more or something. But as you went through that, like, was there a cadence? Like, how did your team help you with that? Like, because that's tough, right? Like, sometimes you're darned if you do, darned if you don't, sort of thing. Like, you gotta always find that balancing point.
Yeah, I think that you have to be careful with capacity
Hmm.
number discussion, right? And that's a major learning for me this year. One is to install a system as middleware to help me see what my pipeline looks like, what my capacity is, what am I selling, where am I selling it. But you have to be careful how you talk about that number, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I hear, 70% billable, 90% in sort of an IT focused production firm. Well, we're strategy.
Yeah.
So, how much discussion and work and participating in meetings that not be directly billable do they do? And I really took this year to figure out what that number was. And I think the ambitious leader in me always wanted to drive up billable percentage, right? Like that was always what I was gunning for. But what I started to notice is what's the impact on the team? Given that what I'm asking of them, given what clients are asking of them, is it right to continue to try to drive that number up? And the answer was no.
Hmm.
And what I found is that billable percentage is lower, and that has to be okay, and you have to run the business around that. But also, how do you talk about that with your team? It's sensitive. I don't want people coming into meetings and sort of defending what their percentage is, and they can't always control that. Maybe I didn't sell enough, and our, business development team didn't sell enough. Maybe we didn't sell something that directly correlated with billable work. And so I think, Grant, this year it was really about learning caution and the nuance of how you handle your capacity in a turbulent market. And for me, it's when I have a lot of it, I have to make business decisions.
Yeah.
When I have a little of it, I have to make staffing and operational
Yep.
decisions because I'm nearing that point where I'm going to overbook them, which I'm very careful about.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, listen, a certain a predictable market solves a lot of problems,
Yeah,
right? Like, and we all know that, right? And
right.
we see that, and there are agencies out there that found those niches that were reliable growth. They didn't have to pivot. And then there's other times too when this lack of certainty can cause and kind of force you to, like, I think, look at some of those pieces, and that's okay. I don't think every year is a sort of linear path to growth for agencies, right?
Right.
Market condition changes, verticals change, new technologies get rolled out. We're seeing obviously AI impacting things. And one of the main reasons why that I've been reading more and more about that new business didn't pick up is just that lack of customers feeling certainty around committing to something, right? So
Correct.
like
I
so
agree.
much business was lost to indecision. You weren't even losing to competitors, which is almost worse, right? It's like, oh, if I lose to a competitor, I can do something different. Did you, when you were looking at that and you were looking, one of the things that I even did, and I'd be curious if you did this, we would actually go and position ourselves to say, listen, we're not going to bill you our PMs, doing weekly status meetings with you because that's us making sure that we are aligned on value and delivery. Did you see any opportunities to do that within the customer relationships you had, like especially when looking at billable utilization? Because that almost empowers the team to say, no, I don't need to worry about my status meeting, right? Like that's
Right.
accounted for. I'd be curious if you experienced any of that.
I did. Actually, we had a client yesterday who wants to do less because there's an element of trust
Hmm.
and our frequency of communication is there. So, why to stop everything, gather in a
Yeah.
room
Yeah.
and go over all the things that we're already talking about all the time anyway? Wasn't interesting? Do you remember when we used to do hour meetings? I mean, it is very rare that I'm anywhere for an hour. So that sort of amazes me, sort of that compression of time, how
Yeah.
we've gotten more efficient. We were starting internal meetings at 5 after and 35 after the hour just to give people 5 minutes to stand up and take a break. So I think, we're looking at time differently. Promethean research came out yesterday with value-based pricing. Here we go again,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? That the value of the hour is all of a sudden declining again. And we have to think about value. But I think operational clarity, discipline, and driving value during uncertain market times are what we need. For
Yeah.
me, to bring that sort of rigor into the business because of the challenging times, I think for me that's more fun. I'm not a coaster,
Yeah.
so I think it's an exciting period for sure.
That's awesome. Have you been looking at value-based pricing? When I encounter it, people are like, "Well, what does that mean?" And I think that inherently has forced me to say, whether it's opportunity-based or, almost change the nomenclature a little bit. But have you been looking at that as an agency, or what do you think is your runway for how you price and go to market?
Well, it always comes up. I think every other year we're sort of looking at this model and should we shift to that?
Yeah.
I have to tell you that our number one value in the business is we are revenue drivers. That's it. And so I think the fact that we are always focused on, if someone's investing X hundreds of thousands of dollars us in a year, what is the return they're seeing on that? And I think I price according to what I think the
Yeah.
return can be, what they can tolerate, and then I factor that sort of time piece in. So this value of the hour decreasing, efficiencies coming in with I think it's on all of our minds, but it still does take time to do the work. So I always think that's it's almost like a triad of sort of what does the market bear, how much time and the value you deliver. But really keeping value at the forefront, I think, is always the most important.
One of the pieces, and you articulate it really well, but one of the challenges that I often hear is like a customer won't share what that revenue potential is, right? And now you don't have your baseline to say, hey, are we hitting the value metrics that we thought we would with this campaign or this effort? How are you approaching customers in that conversation to, leverage that information and data to demonstrate your value that you're bringing?
Well, I think our customers are really transparent about that because I act as a fractional CMO and so does my team. I sit in the C-suite of a lot of these engagements, and I'm the fractional CMO for about 3 brands right now where I'm advising them on growth strategy and I'm sitting in those meetings. So we usually get that sort of detail and we push for it. The other piece is the immersion strategy that I think is really important for us is that we have to get fully immersed in their business to ever show a return. Otherwise, the content's going to feel a little bit distant. I'm not going to have the metrics that you're asking about in order to show the return. So we have to dive really, really deep into that. And I mean, I'm usually able to make it happen. And it has to be a 30-day, within 30 days, 2 days on site minimum to really sort of immerse ourselves in the business.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, and that's not applicable to every consultancy agency out there, but I think it's really highlighting, and you even led with this, right? The three kind of industries that you really focus on, and now you're even getting into, well, here's our distinct process. And I think that's what makes, at least my job, really fun is you see the snowflake kind of piece of your vision and how you implement it. And then operationally, I mean, you're talking about capacity, you're talking about revenue generation, you're talking about base metrics and all that. Like those are the common pieces without hopefully inflicting any changes to like your vision and to how you're implementing kind of your process and where you've seen success.
Sure. And I think staying true to what that vision is, I prefer, listen, there's a lot of safety in the factory, right? That when you have monthly recurring revenue and you have repeatable services and you're able to scale those for whatever reason, and maybe given my background on the brand side, I have chosen a consultancy sort of route so that, when you're working in private equity back to middle market, they're bringing you such a variety of businesses
Yeah.
that very few are repeatable. Then in franchising, a wellness franchise is incredibly different from a fitness concept, pure fitness concept versus a restaurant, right? So I feel like I've sort of chosen this variety, even though I've honed in on two areas of specialization, like two verticals, but it's all growth marketing. And that for me is the challenge, and where the value-based pricing even probably comes in even more because I have to demonstrate revenue growth.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And for anybody either just joining us a little bit late, we got Amy Anderson here, and put your questions if you want to hear more on go to market and what Amy's doing there, what her team's doing. Let us know. That's always really helpful. But we're going to cover a number of different topics. And Amy, so as you look at how you position yourself, where have you found either resources or the areas where it's like, oh yeah, that's my tried and true, like. Is it a specific niche, or how do you validate that along the way to, grow your organization reliably and have confidence going into even from a 2025 where, you needed that resolute sort of mindset into a 2026, which I mean, everyone's like, oh man, are we, well, we're only 3 weeks into this year? Like, what's going on? Like, how do you transition that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to note at the beginning of the year, I'm in a CEO mentoring group and they talked about starting the year fast. And I thought that was really good advice to get in the beginning of the year that, they likened it to, I like F1 racing a lot, but they were saying, when you sort of head out quickly in the front, you have cleaner air. So I do, want to remind myself often that like this, we have to go. Like, because all of a sudden you're in May, you're
Yeah.
in Q2. I think for us, a conversation I have with my CFO quite a bit, who's always looking at what you and I talk about in our meetings with margin,
Yeah.
right? I think it's important. I think it's an important baseline. What is your most profitable work? What do you think you can and your team can lean into the most and be really proud of about what you can produce? And where do you see it being having a competitive edge in the market? I definitely think one example of that for us is our branding work.
Yeah.
Because we're a strategy firm and because I have a strong creative team that we lean into those projects. They can be the creepiest of scopes, right? Depending on a lot of times we nail it in round one, sometimes we're into two to three, and that can change everything. But also, Grant, looking at your client for those projects, is it a good fit? When it's a more turbulent market, you don't have as much choice.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually ironic because I think you need to look for a good fit because if creep is going to happen and things are going to go off the rails, you just have to have good client fit with those projects too.
Yeah, well, and it almost becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy in that regard, from a positive and potentially a negative outcome standpoint, where you find the right clients that value the work, and okay, going into the second round isn't that big of a deal. Like
Right.
at least from the businesses and agencies I came from, because I knew could retain them for 8 to 10 years, right? And you're starting these like long-term relationships that had a lot of value, and if you could look at the full scope, okay, a round or two at the beginning to demonstrate that value and that you weren't going to let them down could go a long way to
Absolutely.
generating revenue with certainty in the future, and revenue with a customer that was mutually just beneficial, right? Where you had self-respect for each other. And that was just, I think, something that I loved as being part of a small agency.
Yes, and it's a great place to start and I almost believe that in most of our engagements, it doesn't make sense unless we start with that foundational piece. And we're talking a lot about the foundation. Are you positioned right in the market? Are your avatars and personas on track? Because you can't really afford to miss in this market with so much data. There's really not a lot of uncertainty with respect to return, right? So building that foundational layer is a key part of that. And
Hmm.
then you get to know the business and them and each other so well that I think the subsequent sort of activities and performance marketing that comes from that, you were able to sort of drive that initial foundation.
And so as a CEO, you're looking at, you mentioned, okay, the sales sort of driving that foundation. You mentioned the customer side, almost like an evaluation period, right? Are they a good fit? If What do you encourage your team to bring during that relationship kind of building side? Or, I traditionally call it like sales to delivery handoff. Like, what do you expect? What have you seen be really successful in that process?
Assertive strategy. I think that, one of the things we talk about, even with a franchise development client, right, where we're driving franchise lead generation. But the ICP, as part of that, an ideal client profile of theirs, you to really, really hone in and bring our experience to that strategy, who we're trying to target, bring our point of view. So when I say assertive strategy, it's that's what our clients are paying for,
Yeah.
right? They really want us to come in sort of guns blazing with our point of view, bringing our experience and energy. I was just with a team member before this call and I reminded her, I said, we sell what's in this box, right? And how we show up for clients in the meetings is not just about the creative work, but it's really what are we bringing in terms of our energy and advice and guidance into this, sort of two-dimensional space that we work in.
Well, and I mean, just trying to connect the dots, and if I'm forcing it, correct me if I'm wrong, but that culture side of, okay, well, the billable hour needs to become more efficient, right? If you're dinging them for every admin hour, they're going to question what they're paying for, right? And I think it's those pieces of alignment that you're really honing and bringing to the table with these relationships that, again, like they start to stack to build that momentum of, oh yeah, I am getting value. Oh yeah, this person is bringing that momentum. How do you just continue, like what are the tenure of those relationships that you have, and how do you just make sure that you're like I'm an operator, like how that team is set up for success then to continue that momentum?
Sure. I think to always be thinking about, it's this phrase we use, what about? What if what
Yep.
about this pivot? We had it with a nonprofit client recently that felt like it had stagnated a little bit. I think the engagement and what we were bringing to the table, and we came in guns blazing with PR strategy, pivoting. I saw the stagnation a little bit, Grant. I'm sure you've been there where you look
Yeah.
in a long-term engagement and say, you know what? I don't know that we've asked ourselves, what about these 5 to 7 other sort of strategies that we can deploy in this engagement. And for us, it's because our scopes are flexible, because they have to be as an outsourced marketing team. We have freedom and flexibility to do that.
Yeah.
If I don't give the team enough time to sit and think, then they're not going to be able to deliver that. And that's hard to quantify, right? That's that gray area of billable percentage. And they come in reviews. We do reviews every 90 days. And they come in there and they will ask, can you make sure the next quarter I have space to think?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a balancing act. And you're right, there's these sort of moments of, am I giving them the right amount of time? Are they like, I've been there, I've got this time. Am I doing something productive with it to bring to a customer that might be feeling like they need a little bit of love or they need a challenge? And it can be very specific to the customer relationship too. There's some customers that like to be challenged, some don't. Um, I'm going to pivot a little bit here into the tool sets and what you're seeing within Wild Coffee. And as you sit here, like obviously AI 2025 it hit. Where did you see your team leaning into AI? Were there big gains? Did your whole company structure change? Like how did you adapt during that time with AI?
Well, I'm happy to report the whole team company structure did not change.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Like
I knew
many
the
thought
answer to
maybe
that
it
one.
should, I really think I was looking for magic bullet platforms in
Mm,
25 that, somebody brought one to me with highly trained marketing agencies, and I brought it to my team and our marketing agents, and they said, Amy, that's what we're doing. And that's
yeah.
how we have our projects and our master super instructions set up inside of there. And my big learning was that it's really these micro interactions with AI or AI features being built into multiple platforms that my team is using that is creating efficiency and broadening the power of their work. It's expanding an idea set, not
Yeah.
replacing the people, and it's not found in a platform. It's really how is technology using it? I know at Parallax, you guys are looking at how that comes into play. And what I would expect in the next 18 months is are there recommendations to me looking at our data about heads up that you want to give me inside of the tool to
Yeah.
say, Amy, you need to consider these four things based on your capacity, your utilization, your margins, or how you have that set up. It's just sort of a prompt of ideas, and in addition to efficiency.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, we ran betas last year, and so I'll speak to this a little bit, but we ran betas last year. And I think for me, as a product company, it's what problems are we solving for our customers, right? What matters to them? And I think, this AI as this silver bullet, like it's not going to come as some encapsulated experience. It's going to be specific areas. And at least with my own AI, like I've built agents. I've got, we're talking about custom GPTs and how we allow teams to, query and ask questions about that. So it kind of gets the value there. But they're solving very specific use cases with the intent of, I think, just pushing along like a decision point or providing additional context or information. It's not doing like holistic roles or anything. We try to implement a tool for our ticketing system, for example. And, they were saying, well, it can reason, it can do all these things. And the reality is, I mean, even the conversation with you, while coffee operates different from a 100-person agency, and that group might be more retainer based or fixed bid, and that context is going to shape how they question the data, right? And interrogate it. And guess what? Like, it just wasn't a good fit in that regard. But we learned stuff. We built a lot of content to support it, and we got better for it. But it was just sort of, and we dove into it, but I think even we learned how do we get into those, specific problem sets? And yeah, no, we're very excited well, I'm very excited for what our product team is bringing in 2026.
Right.
But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned even leading up to this, your team looked at it like Figma. You've got custom GPTs. How do you balance them not going down a rabbit hole that maybe won't deliver revenue or value to a customer? Like, where are you finding kind of the balancing acts there?
Well, I think it's a lot of what we're doing is sort of it's micro interactions, smaller tasks that we use for it, and also the conversation around it. I think, 12 months ago, I think there was a lot of sort of slop work happening. I think
Mhm.
that there was, a few prompts and there was a cut and paste or a copy paste into a document without realizing its limitations.
Yeah.
So even helping them build project structure, helping them build instructions, turning off the model so it doesn't share our IP
Yeah.
with the model is a big one too. So imagine 12 months ago, I didn't even, I wasn't even conceiving that that may be important not to share our IP to a model that I'd like to keep more insulated. So I think it's having the conversation in the daily workflow and not looking for the platform or the person or the process that gets solved. It's much more micro than that. And I still continue to bring platforms to the team. I will come and they say, okay, she's got another one. And I just want to say, evaluate this. What do you think?
Yeah.
And then I'm starting to understand how my team thinks about it and how they see value in it. It can't just come in that form. So I just think it's a lot of conversation between all of us now.
Well, and while you're bringing platforms, believe you had mentioned, Lee, like as on a monthly basis, right? It's not like every day you're shooting an email and
Yeah.
say, "Hey, evaluate this today," where it almost can be a disruption. And I think even just that sort of mindset and cadence sets healthy expectations that no, we can't ignore this. We can't just let it happen to us. But we also have full-time jobs, right? Like we've got to
Right.
balance this out. So
Right. And I think, that exuberance as a business leader of wanting to be in an offensive but defensive mode, right? To not get caught, not with your eye. What did I say before? Like your eye has to be on the ball, but not on it all the time,
yes.
right? That like keep keep looking and thinking and talking and asking, but be sensitive to your team,
Hmm.
especially with creative services teams, to come and say, hey, look, I mentioned I found a kid in college that can develop 500 pieces of static creative for $1. I think that it's very different skill set to have a highly talented, experienced team of designers like I have. And then what does that mean for them to be prompting AI? And there's a little bit of that. I mentioned Figma Make with wireframes. So
Mhm.
that's that part of that element where inside of the platforms they're already using to expand, to automate a few things, but it's not shifting their whole role. It's not having turning them into something they're not. It's asking them and having them share with me about the ways that they're using it.
Yeah, one of the sayings that I did a webinar last year, and I think it was Kurt Schmidt or Albert Banks sort of said one of them said, AI doesn't have taste, right? And I think that is so distinct, especially within creative services. Now you can talk about efficiency and effectiveness of coding, and that's like the dev world that I come from. But I know I don't have a design bone in my body. And so like that has always been something that I love working with good designers and creative folks because they can just bring stuff to life that I just don't have a talent for. And I think that's so true relative to AI, where yes, you can mass produce, but in an agency like yours, I mean, it sounds like you see AI as an enhancer, not a threat at this point.
Not at
Is
this
that
point.
fair?
I think it's fair. I met with someone yesterday who is rather than, well, she's using AI and Squarespace to build a site that's supposed to scale.
Sure.
And I said, great, you can do some of these things. That is available to you. Long term, maybe you have to go and redo things. So there, just because it's capable doesn't mean that human sort of strategy of what technology and what scalability needs to be there for a business that's scaling is a different story than, of course, you can. It
Yeah.
just doesn't always mean it's the right approach at
Yeah.
this point, certainly.
So we're about half past, just a little bit beyond. We'll probably, unless there's a bunch of questions that come in, be done at about 40 past. But Amy, as you're looking at 2026, what are kind of your predictions? Where, I mean, relative to wild coffee or AI, like what are the big trends that you're keeping an eye on coming into the new year?
Well, I definitely think that expanding where the and of marketing, that we have a lot of clients who will come to us with a vision of these are my three channels, these are the
Yeah.
two sort of lanes I play in, and we're really trying to expand this into an and because we all know that awareness will drive performance marketing metrics. And, to keep the discipline around the awareness layer always, and that doesn't mean you're doing outdoor and broadcast to try to drive, with the lane that we play in. That's not that, but it's really sort of considering the ands, and where from a PR standpoint to a content marketing to AEO, SEO, where are we and how thorough are we being across the full spectrum to drive effectiveness? I think gone are the days of, hey, I can drive performance marketing only to scale a business. It's just not going to happen. And I find clients are much more open to that guidance from us, where we are, offering PR layers and
Yeah.
content layers and sort of using AI actually to take content and make it snackable. And that's another useful application is to really use those platforms to expand the assets to be in more channels and more places telling a more complete story.
And so it sounds like you're focused on your go-to-market pieces, but your services are almost, would you say expanding, or have you always traditionally played in that space?
No, I think they're expanding. I think we just find that you have to play in more lanes to
Yeah.
try to move the needle with your KPIs across the board. And if you're not broad enough, then you're missing out on some of those channels. And so, and I think we all have to be creative to break through.
Yeah.
I think that is always sort of at the forefront and creating brand applications and foundations that actually tell a very strong point of view. When I had a client come to us and we were asking about an avatar, a celebrity avatar for their brand, and they gave us Kevin James Like we took it and ran with it. So like those little nuggets we're looking for harder than ever. I don't want anything to feel generic, to feel sort of playbook driven. I want to push creative boundaries really hard in this year because I think it warrants it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it seems like there's just so much noise out there that you have to, right? I mean, no one wants to just contribute to the white noise. So I think, again, not that I'm the creative strategist that you are, but that necessity to stand out, to bring value, it kind of just forces your hand in that regard. You kind of have to dig in a little bit. Where, and you're looking at 2026 as a business owner, as a co-founder, what helps you sleep at night? Like what are the things on the horizon? Are there metrics? Like what are you looking at to say, okay, yeah, there's things I don't control, but here are the things I do control, and that's what I'm going to focus on.
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to sort of people and process because I think
Mhm.
as a professional services firm, as an agency, any sort of consulting firm, I think those are the two things you can control. Right. Do you have the right people in the right seats? And do you have process so that they can deliver on a consistent basis? And I think I thought 2025 was sort of I was the year of scale, and I found some cracks in it in a market that was turbulent. And I love those experiences because it gives you an opportunity, right? You don't learn from what you do right. But I think the people and process piece is what helps me sleep at night, that I have the right people in the right seats and that they have sort of process and workflow that will really support them. Then you can scale, right? But unless those pieces, and then cultural is sort of the umbrella over it, which
Yeah.
is very, very important, that as a business leader, have you created a great place for your team to work? Right.
Yeah.
And there are so many elements of that. Feeling psychologically safe so they can be creative. We for a long time we focused on work-life harmony. I don't want to even call it balance. I think we've achieved that in many ways. I think that that's very important, but we also work hard, right? And so to sort of strike that balance of the harmony and safety and kindness while really sort of demanding the rigor in the delivery is not the easiest balance to strike, but I think it's something that we need to all be looking at.
Yeah, it's and this wasn't even planned, but people process tools is what we talk about even here at Parallax, right? Where
Mhm.
Parallax being a tool is great. It codifies, it can help give you insights, but if the people and process aren't there, the data isn't trustworthy. And it's been fun partnering with your team who have really leaned in on that side. I think just hone that narrative, right? That the data is not meant to be shaped to tell the most opportune story or hide all the stuff that we should be trying to hide that it's tough to address. The data is there to your point, like to iterate on, to change. If there's something that is a negative outcome, great, let's address that. I mean, that's the
Right.
point. Let's talk
Right.
about
Or
it.
ask questions. I
Yeah.
think one of the most powerful things you can do as a business leader is to ask.
Yeah.
And to ask the question, hey, this number looks like this, or I'm seeing this trend or pattern here. What do you think about that? Or how is this a reflection of sort of your work style? And you can uncover so much about people's thoughts, about their process, about their belief system that helps you sort of lead them and guide them in the right way. But you would never know those things unless you ask. And that was a big learning for me, that
Mhm.
the data was all there and I was using the data in a way that maybe wasn't the most productive, in that I was so focused on the numbers, and you have to consider sort of the nuance around them, the circumstances, what's feeding those numbers, what makes sense for your agency, and for me to keep driving this billable percentage up instead of being accepting and making sure pricing can support a billable percentage like this and drive the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a constant like push and pull for sure. And we've had a number of customers who, like I said, some of them grew, they had mergers and acquisitions and they kind of found their success that way. Cool. We had others too where maybe headcount stayed flat or even decreased a little bit, but they saw margins increase.
Right.
And it's not for me at Parallax to say either is better, right? It's how you're choosing to, I think, engage your team, engage the market, and kind of roll with either the opportunities or the punches that come with it. But Amy, I want to say it's just been an absolute pleasure talking with you, and I really appreciate you sharing all your insights. Are there any party thoughts that you want to leave our attendees with?
Um, no, well, thank you for having me. I think that just finding balance, right? I think that's the most important piece of like finding balance in the capacity and the utilization, finding balance in the scale, controlled growth, figuring out how to ride these turbulent times going into 26. But I'm super optimistic about this year. I find even num years tend to be my better years than
Yeah.
odd years. I looking back on my life. So I'm super optimistic about the year and really appreciate being here today and being able to talk to you and everyone.
Well, and if I could, I mean, even in prep for this, I think one of the things that I've really appreciated about you is that, yes, okay, we've talked about the data, and I know you from the Parallax customer side, and that's foundational to our tool. And yet, you've introduced me to a go-to-market person, and you've talked about your CEO boards that you go and advisory boards that you chat with. And I think it's really awesome to hear a leader say, no, I don't have it all figured out. In fact, I want to be informed by my team. I want to be informed by other people. And that clarity that you bring to then the data and day to day of your business is what I think makes it really productive and really fun. So again, thank you for sharing all your insights. I really appreciate it. Look up Amy on LinkedIn. Her and her team are wonderful. Connect with them, ask questions, and yeah. But we really appreciate it, Amy. We appreciate you and your team being a customer, and we hope you enjoy Florida and the rest of your week.
Thanks so much, Grant. Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks everybody.